Hello growers and welcome to the garden. In October, autumn has not come quietly and already I'm wearing several layers and had to turn on the central heating indoors. However, summer was also very cool and quite wet, and these tomato plants have been completely devastated by blight and need to be removed. If you've got any green tomatoes on your plants that are unaffected by the disease, then you can pull them off and use them in chutneys or other recipes, or let them ripen up indoors. To do this, put them in a bag or a box with a banana or other ripe tomatoes, and then the ethylene gas that builds up will help turn your green tomatoes red. However, these fruits here have been badly infected and needlessly wasted. Until very recently, my job really stopped me from spending any serious time in the garden, and I find myself grieving over the last of the summer and what could have been some lovely fresh harvests. But sadly, much of this food and all of these plants need to be either burnt or disposed of in the council's green bin. One thing I'm not going to be doing is adding diseased foliage to my compost heap, because I'm not at all confident that I can bring up the temperature to one suitable to kill off any disease. And I'll make sure not to use the same area to grow tomatoes again next year. One thing that didn't help was that the morning dew would completely cover the plants, and then by the end of August the trees would entirely shade the tomatoes until the afternoon. So the plants never really dried off properly, and I think those moist conditions, as well as my inability to check on the plants and prune them regularly, created the perfect environment for disease to take hold. So next year I'm going to plant my tomatoes in that bed there, where the sunshine stays for longer and until later in the year. October is the ideal time of year to start cutting hedges, as we avoid disturbing any nesting birds. I was told my landlord would cut my hedge for me, so all I've done is use a pair of secateurs to cut 1 or 2 branches. However, all of my hedges desperately need a trim. I'm only 5'5" and I can't imagine going through there as a normal sized person. So recently I decided to buy this cordless hedge trimmer and give it a go myself. This one is lightweight and has a lot of safety features built in, but the main reason that I chose this model is that it's battery powered, which means I can use this absolutely anywhere without worrying about how I'm going to plug it in, and the batteries are interchangeable, and that means I'm slowly building up capacity for all of my gardening tools. Cutting a hedge is relatively straightforward, but be sure to wear eye protection and consider using ear defenders too. You connect the battery on the underside of the unit, and then you press and hold both of the buttons built into the forward and rear handles to turn on the trimmer. Then place the hedge trimmer flat up against the hedge and make large sweeping motions across the face to cut the hedge. The best thing about wearing ear defenders is that you get to listen to music while using power tools. The goal is to cut back the hedge so it looks roughly even, but the real trick is to try and make sure that the bottom sticks out more than the top. That way the hedge doesn't end up shading itself and can grow nice and green. Once you've cut a rough shape, you can go back and get it nice and tidy on a second pass. I forgot to turn on the timer to see how long the trimmer lasted. I did get to listen to a couple of albums, which is long enough for me. Well, that's this side of the hedge done, but I'm probably going to have to go and knock on some doors to find a ladder so I can deal with the top. And now it's time for your questions. Last month I asked you what gardening questions you had for October, and Rebecca wrote in to ask more about pumpkin harvesting and planting. Well, I'm going to save any planting until early next year. It was in April and May that I sowed my mini pumpkins Baby Boo and Jack Be Little. And as you can probably see over my shoulder, the plants have started to die and the pumpkins are ready to be harvested and cured. So at the start of the month, it's time to cut off the ripe fruits and place them somewhere dry and airy to cure. I'm going to use my greenhouse for this, and I'll leave them here to cure for a few weeks, and they should be ready for long-term storage by Halloween. And while we might have to be a little bit patient to start growing next year's pumpkins, some seeds you can start in October are broad beans or fava beans. If your soil isn't prone to waterlogging and you can support them and cover them with fleece or grow them in a polytunnel through the winter, then you'll get an earlier crop next year. Similarly, you can start peas or sweet peas indoors in trays, or you can plant them in the ground if you pick cold tolerant varieties and protect them against the worst of the weather, as well as pigeons and mice. For indoor growing, you can keep sowing herbs like basil, parsley, coriander and oregano, and start thinking about fast growing crops like bean sprouts and microgreens. And as we mentioned in last month's video, now is bulb planting season, which includes onion and garlic, which can still be planted from set. And at long last, I finally managed to get my hands on some elephant garlic, which I'll be planting out in the middle of the month. As the temperatures start to feel more and more like autumn, growth will begin to slow down for a lot of our plants, which might need some kind of cover to protect them against the worst of the frosts. So towards the end of the month and through into November, I'll start bringing plants into the greenhouse. These strawberries could probably survive outdoors, but they'll grow a lot faster and fruit a lot earlier if they have more warmth through the winter. But before we put them away and leave them to rest, make sure that you finish doing all you can to propagate your plants. That could be saving seeds, taking cuttings, or in the case of strawberries here, making sure that runners have been rooted into the ground or into a container, or even dividing the crown into separate plants. I'll show you how to do all of those things in this video here, while dressed up as George Clooney, Brad Pitt and Matt Damon, trying to pull off the perfect garden heist. Otherwise, as always, happy gardening.